I briefly talked about on the show a month ago when I was completing it. This was a book, actually. So it's called Takedown: From Communists to Progressives, How the Left Has Sabotaged Family and Marriage. It was written by Dr. Paul Kangor. This book, for whatever reason, took me a really long time to read because each chapter in his book actually could have been expanded into an entire book of its own. So he talks about how from the advent of Marxism or the advent of communism, how they've really had their eye on destroying the traditional family unit. That would be one man and one woman married to each other for life who raise biological children within that family unit in their home, understanding that the parents have parental rights over the children, the traditional family structure. We don't have to get political about it. Well, each and every chapter in this book is interesting because Dr. Kangor walks through, well, how are communists trying to destroy marriage? And he talks about, well, marriage itself. He talks about the sexual revolution and how the sexual revolution ushered in promiscuity. What does promiscuity do? It damages marriage. Birth control and abortion. What do birth control and abortion do? Well, they not only damage sexuality, they damage children in marriage, destroy relationships. He talks about the roots of radical feminism in Marxism and how radical feminism is, it is anti-woman, it's also anti-man, and it's certainly anti-marriage, anti-monogamy. He talks about gay marriage, obviously destructive to traditional marriage when it's recognized the way that our government recognizes. He talks about transgenderism and the assault on gender. He talks about parental rights over their children. He talks about atheism. As I said, this book is, I'm a pretty quick reader. Let's just say that. I'm a pretty quick reader and I input data from books pretty well. This book took me a long time to read because each and every chapter was so chock full of history and information that I was constantly jotting down the names of other references and other books that he was citing. But it is very interesting because we on the right, particularly the evangelical right, make accusations of the left pretty frequently that they don't respect marriage, they don't respect, sex as intended by God in the context of marriage. They certainly don't respect the dignity of life. They don't respect, gender. They don't respect science or religion, however you want to look at that. A combination of both would be best. And we make these accusations, but it's really interesting to see that this isn't just haphazard. It isn't some woke ideology that they have invented on the fly to meet the moment, if you will. I hate that phrase that the left uses, but seems apropos here. No, this is something that was discussed as far back as Karl Marx and Engels. Actually, Engels specifically was very anti-family, very anti-traditional marriage, very anti-monogamy, very sexually promiscuous in not only his philosophy, but in his behavior. And it's very interesting to see some of the outgrowth of this philosophy, whether it was Marx and Engels, whether it was the Frankfurt School, whether it was, the Soviet Union, whether it was communist China, Mao's China, wherever it was, like the original philosophy that grew into the ideologies of now. So the original philosophy of radical feminism from the Soviet Union that encouraged abortion, that was exported here, that Margaret Sanger actually admired in the Soviet Union. That's just one example, but it's very interesting to see the history, to see how that philosophy, when it was discussed back then, has now come to roost here in the United States and how destructive it is. And we all know, of course, this is a quote. By the way, I almost didn't write any notes for this show at all because I thought, well, if I write notes based on these books, then I'm going to have to do a whole episode on each of the books. And that's true. I have literally probably like 50 notes from this book, and they're all so good I don't know what to pull. But this is one of the things that Dr. Kangor says. He says, children who grow up with the presence of a mother and father are less likely to be poor, to end up in prison, or to get addicted to drugs. Also, they are generally healthier, stronger, and more successful. The most common denominator among men in prisons is not racial or ethnic background, not income or class distinction, not high school or college diploma, but whether or not they grew up with a father in the home. And that, it's entirely true. The statistics show that, the surveys show that, the data shows that. That is why radical leftists have their eye on marriage, because marriage is this, I don't want to call it indestructible, but this foundational, fundamental institution on which our nation is built. We talk so often about our nation being built on life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, but truly our nation is built on the family. Our nation is built on this bedrock idea that a man and a woman get married and have children and operate as a little community in and unto themselves. And that this family provides and protects each other and takes care of each other and keeps each other moral and healthy and fulfilled and happy and lives for each other and not just each individual to himself or herself. And if we destroy that in our country, or if we allow it to be destroyed, then it's going to be very easy for the left to change our system of government as well, because the needs of our country will change if the institutions of our country changes. So if you destroy marriage, then who are people going to rely on? They're not going to rely on their parents. They're not going to rely on their spouses. They're not going to rely on their children. They're going to have to look outside of that family structure for reliance, and that's exactly what radical leftists want. They want people to need the government, because in order for a westernized nation like the United States, a free nation, to be transformed into a Marxist nation, there has to be some impetus. There has to be some reason for that to happen. And one of the reasons could certainly be that people are desperate for help. They're desperate for something to rely on, and the government can swoop in as a savior and say, well, we'll save you. However, this is what you have to pay us. Again, this is what we see in COVID. We see, we'll save you. Only the government can save you. Only the government can save the economy. Only the government can save lives. Only the government, is the answer here. But you have to sacrifice your liberties. You have to close down your business. You have to sacrifice your Christmas. You have to listen to the CEO of Pfizer over your own common sense here. So highly recommend Take Down, From Communist to Progressive, How the Left Has Sabotaged Family and Marriage. You will learn so much, so much. I certainly did.